This is Angelina Singer, author of the Upper World series, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout, the best podcast for independent artists.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Max Bowen.
And I'm Curtis Hughes. Max, how's it going?
Great to be back, Curtis. We're back.
We are back.
Yes.
It's been a couple weeks for me, a week for you.
Yeah, exactly. Just, traveling the world, seeing new things, meeting new people, having all kinds of crazy ass adventures, which we will not talk about ever. We can't do it.
No.
Sword of secrecy.
Nope.
Sword of secrecy. But man, this is gonna be a really, really cool episode because we get to welcome back an old friend of the show. He was last on 7 years ago. That's wild. For his, at the time, debut book, Children of Apis. And now he's back with a brand new story and a brand new genre. John Raposa joins us. John, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you here.
Welcome, John.
Be here, Max.
So this new book is a very, very different thing for you. It is called All in the Cards. And where your first book, your first trilogy of books actually, was this like dystopian thriller. This is a very spooky book. This is a very scary turn for you. So I'd like to just to begin by kind of just walking us through what All in the Cards is all about.
Basically, it starts off as these two young kids, middle school age, and they go to a state fair in Indiana, in a small town, and the girlfriend coaxes the boyfriend to go into a gypsy tent to get their palms read. So they go in, and the gypsy's sitting at a table, typical setup, in her garb, and she's eating grapes out of a ceramic bowl. And they sit down, and instead of reading their palms, she reaches down and pulls out a tattered deck of cards and spreads them face down on the table. And then she proceeds to flip one over, and it's like the three of hearts. And it looks like a regular deck of cards, except there's a picture in the middle. And like the picture is like of a teddy bear. Like the boy, Danny, is like, oh my God, that's the teddy bear I had when I was a kid. And the gypsy nods, puts it down, and then she flips over another one, and it's got like a bicycle tire with a baseball card in it. And the boy's like, that's the bike I had when I was a kid. And the gypsy nods, eats some grapes, and she goes to pick up another card, has it in her hand, and then she starts choking on the grape. She falls over, knocks the table and the cards over. And for some reason, Danny has a compulsion to pick up the cards. And they realize that the gypsy's dead first. He plucks the card out of her hand, and it's like the 9 of spades. And the picture in the middle is a broken piece of ceramic. And it matches the pattern that was on the dish that she was eating the grapes out of. And the premise of the book is red cards are good, black cards are bad. And cards appear in their lives as they're growing up, and they portend good things that are going to happen or bad things. Every chapter is a different card.
That is a creepy card trick. Hooray, you're cursed.
Yes. Yeah. So the cards get more sinister as the book goes along.
More sinister? Jesus, dude. We're starting out pretty sinister as it is.
Yeah. So it was a fun book to write.
Yeah. Why this genre though? What kind of compelled you to say, okay, my next book is going to be this like psychological thriller?
Well, it was funny. My wife and I were just laying in bed one night, and she said something like, what if you saw a picture of us in the future? This was like before we were together, we saw a picture of us in the future. And then she rolled over and fell asleep. And in 5 minutes, I came up with that scene in the tent. And I nudged her awake, and I said, how about this? And that's how I got the premise of, instead of a picture, having cards with pictures in them. And it just went from there.
Very cool. Now, do you have a real interest in this genre? Do you read other books by other authors?
Well, I've always enjoyed Stephen King and, Dean Koontz and stuff like that when I was growing up. So, so I guess I had a little inkling to do something like that.
Nice.
So in the book, we have a mystical deck of playing cards that changes the lives of our main characters and those that actually handle it. Why cards? Why use that as a vehicle for this dark power?
Well, I figured it was something tangible that everybody can relate to. Everybody's played cards, people, done the tarot card thing, but it was just something that, people have in the house, and it was a vehicle that I could have appear, I won't give stuff away, but Danny would be, pouring cereal out of a cereal box and a card would come out. Or it was a small enough object that I could have it appear in different things in books or in different things like that. So it went well with the story.
How do you pace a book like this? You're going to have these cards getting revealed, here and there throughout the story. So how'd you go about sort of planning what was going to happen?
I basically paced it so it went from middle school to middle age. So it followed them. So it's not, some people may read the beginning and think, oh, this is a young adult book. It's really not a young adult book. It's in a book kind of like my Children of Apis trilogy that most of my readers are adults. So it starts out as they're young, but I kind of paced it as they got older, cards would appear. And like I said, the cards were sinister. The cards almost developed a personality where they would become darker and also play like little sinister tricks, like make you think like this is what the card means, and then a curveball will happen in the chapter. And it really wasn't what that meant. It meant something totally different. And so, yeah. And so the reader has to they may think like, oh, this is what this means. And as they're reading the chapter, or maybe a couple of chapters down the road, it's not necessarily what it meant. It really portended this mishap and stuff. And other characters get involved because other characters come in contact with the cards, and you'll meet the other characters and you'll get to know them, and you may see them down the road in the book. Who knows?
Okay, Curtis, rule of thumb. No more county fairs and no more going into weird tents. And if we see a person eating grapes, run like fuck.
But clowns are still okay.
No.
No. Okay.
No. Set them on fire. I'm going by what I read in books and see in movies, okay? But John, I'd like to ask, if it's not too much of a spoiler, just what are these cards, and like what do they do exactly?
Well, basically they attach themselves to their quote owner. And essentially Danny and Leigh try everything to try to destroy the cards and get rid of the cards, and they're basically indestructible. And one of the gypsies actually says that the only way the cards pass to another owner is when the previous owner dies. So that's what they're faced with throughout the story is, how they can actually get rid of these cards and, live a normal life.
So by dying, basically.
Well, hey, author's privilege. We'll see how it ends.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing. You get to kind of build this entire world here. Was this your first idea, or did you kind of go through some different ones, maybe like a haunted doll or a haunted toy or something else?
For some reason, I came up with the card idea right away.
Nice.
Like I said, when I was responding to my wife's, initial idea, she had a picture. I just thought of it. I was in a tent and I was thinking, what other things could a gypsy have? They have tarot cards. So I came up, instead of tarot cards, I came up with a different type of card, regular playing cards, but they have pictures on them.
And I like that because that's a little cliche, I think, to go with tarot cards. It's kind of the thing, gypsy, gypsy fortune teller, tarot cards. It just, you expect that, but I like that you go in a different route here.
Yeah, certainly not something that folks would be expecting necessarily right out of the gate. As a writer, did the book in any way open up any new creative doors for you as you were going along?
It's funny because as I write, like I said, this one took a little longer than my other three, but as I write, for some reason, you gain momentum as you're writing and the creative juices flow. And I find, I get ideas when I'm taking a shower or I'm, lifting weights or something. When your mind is doing something that you don't have to think about, then your mind can wander and think. So it kind of picks up speed as I go along. And I always have like a Word document or something that when I get a chapter idea, I'll just put it down with some bullets and and what I usually do is my first book I wrote on the computer. And I found that my second, third, and this book, it was better for me to write in a notebook because on a computer, you're constantly editing. You misspell a word and it stops your thought process. So I write in a notebook, and if, I write something I don't like, I just cross it out and keep on writing. And I could write like 10, 12, 13 pages, and then all of a sudden the ideas stop and, all right, put it aside, do it tomorrow or something. So that's how I kind of go about writing.
Ah, gotcha. And so I was curious about, you had said it took a little bit longer than your other books to write. Did you run into any sort of trouble, some stumbling blocks?
Yeah, retired and moved from Rhode Island to Florida, and I started chasing this white ball around in the golf course, and we got 2 dogs, and life just happened. It's amazing how you fill your day, even when you're not. And I also consult a little bit, but I was actually writing when I was doing 8 to 10 hour job and doing it at night a little more than having time on your hands a little bit, and then you start mixing other stuff in. But then once I started writing and getting back into it, then all of a sudden it was like, all right, this is going to happen.
Enjoying the podcast? Get even more of the content you love from artists around the world on Citywide Bites. Experience the show live on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, only on Instagram. With our interactive short-form interview series, you can ask your questions and be a part of the action. Hosted by Max Bowen.
I want to ask about the notebook writing, because that's a cool concept, which you do not hear a lot of. Did that ever give you some new ideas? Like you would maybe go back and say, wait, I crossed this out. It's actually a good idea. Let's bring it back.
Yeah, because my first edit is when I retype what I put in my notebook. I might look at what you might write late at night and you look at it, and the stuff that you did afterwards is like, oh, this is crap. I'm not using this, or I like that initial idea better or something, but it allows me to get a bunch of ideas out quickly, and then I can edit, and that's not going to be obviously the final draft anyway. I'm going to be going over it, and then you change something later on, and now you got to go, or you get an idea of something later on, and now you got to work it through the entire book and put it where it needs to be in the front, and weave that thread all the way through, So there's a lot of that when you're writing. I imagine a lot of authors experience it. All of a sudden you get like, oh, I wish I could really do this here. It's like, but now I got to introduce this character way here, and it changes all this stuff. And yeah.
The big question though is, can you read your own writing? Because I can't.
Yes, I can, but it's amazing what your mind puts in as far as errors. I mean, sometimes when I walk away and come back to it, I'll catch some of the errors, but still, I'll send stuff out and people will come back with stuff, and I'm like, how did I miss that? I mean, I have the Grammarly software, so a lot of the grammar stuff and spelling, that's corrected, but there's still case in point, my Children of Apis trilogy. I was writing the 3rd book, and I started writing a character's name. It turned out to be an Irish character. And I looked at my notes, and I had 2 different names for him. And I was like, what? And all of a sudden I had this sick feeling. And sure enough, I opened up my primary document that I uploaded to Kindle, and it's got a different name. And I oh no. So I went to my paperback and opened one up, and I'm like, yeah, first half of a third of the book had a character, last third of the book, different character. So I had to upload a different one. So some people may have a collector's item.
Oh no. I think I have a physical copy somewhere, actually. Oh,
so that was
no.
a sickening oops. And I was like, oh boy.
Oh.
Yeah. But nobody caught it, because it's the first third is a character, and then he doesn't appear again for 25 pages. And the names are very close. But because I put the character's name in the chapter title, it's first person. This book also is first person, just like the trilogy. Yeah, it's there for everyone to see.
Well, like you said, collector's item. Collector's item. Exactly.
If somebody wants their original copy back, I'll send them the edited version.
No, man, you keep that stuff. You get autographs, and you keep that stuff. You frame that thing. You frame that page. All right. Let us talk about now your main characters for this book, Danny and Leigh. They approach the cards in very different ways. Danny's like, these are awesome. Leigh's like, these are fucked. What fuels their reactions, though?
Well, it turns out, as you'll find out as you read it, the cards kind of have, it's almost like a hypnotic quality. It changes the person's demeanor so that they become a little attached, a little, I won't say maniacal, but they change the person's personality. So Danny was always the keeper of the cards. Sometimes he was the keeper of the cards when he wasn't supposed to have them anymore. There was a little bit of that in the book where he may have lied to his girlfriend / wife a few times about, not having them anymore. So Leigh wasn't really around them as much. So she could kind of look at them from a kind of a sane perspective, whereas Danny was jaded.
I like how Danny winds up being in charge of these things, but he's probably not the person who should be in charge of these things.
The cards had a tendency to seek out maybe, I won't say weak-minded people, but people that could be manipulated.
Ah, so these things have ascensions.
Yes.
Ooh, I like this.
Okay.
Now, at the beginning of the book, we're introduced to an older Danny. He's been through everything that he's been through in the book. He seems very jaded. He's definitely not really with it exactly. But what's the importance of opening with his perspective?
Well, because how I tell the story is Danny has a seatmate, Melanie, and, the typical pleasantries, talking, and Danny basically tells the story of the cards as basically to Melanie as they're flying cross country from Los Angeles to New York. So as the plane's flying, the story is going from Danny as a middle school age all the way to middle age.
And Melanie is thinking, I wish to God I was gotten to another plane.
Well, she kind of, as you'll find out, I don't want to give stuff away.
Sure, of course.
Because the cards have a tendency to gather people. Melanie has a plot in this story.
Oh, okay. So she's not just a vehicle to kind of hear the whole tale.
No.
Oh.
There's a reason she was on the flight.
Which we will not tell you. You got to get the book and read it yourself.
You got to get the book and read it.
For yourself.
Now, we've been talking a lot about this now, but now we're going to invite the author to share the story by reading an excerpt from the book. So, John, the floor is yours, man.
How about we pick the scene in the gypsy tent?
Works for me. Curtis, would you want this deck of haunted playing cards?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Sign me up. Give this to me for like 24 hours. Let's see what happens.
We're terrible role models. The worst. The absolute worst. Your wife's like, absolutely not. You're going to bury those things in the yard.
Hey, Dad, you're playing with some cards? Yeah, sure. Here you go.
Right. So they're entering the tent. So Danny tries to get out of it. He basically says, I'm not getting my palm read. My hands are all sticky from the fried dough. By the renewed excitement in her eyes, meaning Leigh, I can tell I've lost this discussion. The smirk on her face signals that she knows she's won. My left arm almost gets pulled out of its socket as she leads me toward the tent. Unfortunately, there's no line I can use as a final excuse to get out of going. Plastic beads hang in the doorway, and the sharp smell of incense greets us as Leigh drags me inside. I can feel my nose already getting stuffed up by the strong scent. I'll probably be sneezing for the rest of the night after we leave here. A middle-aged woman wearing a purple robe covered with silver stars sits behind a small table draped with a purple tablecloth. A matching kerchief is tied around her head, and she has large silver hoop earrings dangling from her ears. Her makeup is caked on, and she has purple eyeshadow matching her long fingernails. The woman looks up as we enter. She appears troubled but quickly recovers and offers a strained smile. Her left hand reaches into a white ceramic bowl and lifts out a grape, which she deposits into her mouth. She chews for a few seconds and then spreads out her arms. Greetings, your future begins here. I fight the urge to laugh, but I expect the look on my face betrays my true feelings. As if sensing my doubt, the so-called psychic turns to Leigh. Come, bring your boyfriend over here and sit down. Leigh glances over at me with a satisfied smirk. Don't tell me my girlfriend is starting to buy this crap. We walk over and sit in the two seats across the table from the woman. The woman dramatically reaches into the bowl and pulls out another grape. She seems intent on drawing out our visit. Before we begin, there's a small matter of compensation. There's a price list on the table enclosed in a plastic frame. She apparently offers more extensive services than merely reading palms. So I'm somewhat relieved when Leigh only pulls out a $5 bill from her pocket. We would both like to have our palms read. Disappointment temporarily flashes in the woman's eyes as the slim hope of swindling a bit more cash evaporates. She reaches over, deftly plucks the bill from Leigh's hand and places it in the pocket of her robe. She then proceeds to sit there studying us. Then, just as I'm beginning to feel uncomfortable, she begins the charade. I sense a strong bond between you two. The spectral forces are strong. A purple aura surrounds you. Instead of observing the future in your palms, I have something reserved for kindred spirits such as yourselves. It takes all my willpower to keep from giggling. Instead, I concentrate on pretending my face is made of stone. At this point, I might as well go along with this so Leigh can at least enjoy the performance. The woman reaches down next to her. I can't see what she's doing, but I hear the squeak of a lid opening. After rummaging around for a few seconds, she shuts the lid and straightens up. In her hand is a tattered deck of cards. One half of the box is red, while the other half is bright gold. She slowly opens the box, pulls out the deck, and begins shuffling the cards. The backs of the cards are decorated in a similar fashion to her robe. They are deep purple with silver stars. Her hands are very adept at shuffling. As I watch the cards, I begin to feel a bit lightheaded. Pulling my eyes away, I look up at her. Her face is transformed. She looks younger and more beautiful. She has also entered a trance-like state as she continues to shuffle. Eventually, she stops, places the deck in her right hand, and then sweeps them in an arc across the table. Her eyes are glistening with excitement. They are now crystal blue, and I feel drawn to them. I try to recall if they were this color when we first sat down. I force myself to look over at Leigh. She is rigid, and her eyes are riveted to the psychic. My instincts tell me to grab Leigh and rush out of here, but my arms feel heavy and my feet are rooted to the ground. I hesitantly turn forward, but force myself not to look into the woman's eyes. Her hands reach out and hover over the arc of cards. I take a risk and glance up at her face. Thankfully, her eyes are closed and her head is tilted up. I return my gaze to her hands, which continue to sweep back and forth slowly. Before long, the trance-like feeling returns as I become mesmerized by her hands. Her hands abruptly stop and remain rigid over the cards. Her right hand slowly reaches down and flips one of them over. The card is different from your typical playing card. It has the number and symbol for the 3 of hearts and 2 of the opposing corners, but the center of the card contains a picture. The picture shows the face of a worn teddy bear. Recollection immediately hits me. Hey, that's Dirty Bear. I had him when I was a little kid. My excitement snaps Leigh out of her trance. Are you sure, Danny? I'm positive. There's the warm patch on his cheek. See how his ears have been sewn back on? My mother had to reattach them because I used to play with them before I fell asleep. The fortune teller nods her approval and then starts sweeping her hands back and forth. Her eyes close and her head tilts back once again. I anxiously look down and follow her hands. Eventually they stop and she turns the card over to the right. It's another 3, but this time it's a diamond. The picture inside shows the front of a green Schwinn bicycle. A baseball card is attached to a spoke in the front wheel by a clothespin. I'm stunned to be looking at another childhood favorite. That's my old bike. I rode that until I was 9 and outgrew it. Danny, this is starting to creep me out. Let's get out of here. The woman shakes her head and smiles. She reaches into a bowl and grabs another grape. Nonsense, child. These are all happy memories. Just sit and enjoy. Perhaps the next card will be yours. She pops the grape in her mouth and then holds out her hands once again. They begin to move over the cards. Leigh has a vice-like grip on my arm. Only one more card and then we can leave. My head sweeps back and forth, following the psychic's hands. They soon stop, and her hand grasps the card. Before she can flip it over, I hear choking sounds. Her left hand flies to her throat. My eyes follow it up to see a panicked look on her face. Her eyes are wide open. I'm struck by the fact that they are now dark brown. Her face is starting to turn red. Leigh and I are stuck in our seats. I know I should do something, but I'm frozen in fear. The woman suddenly jerks up out of her seat. Her knees hit the table, causing it to topple over. She stands there for a few seconds, gasping for breath. A sickening wheeze emanates from her mouth. I find myself standing with no memory of getting up. Leigh still has her hand clamped on my arm. Want me to keep going?
No, that was amazing. That was really, really good. So very, very like, creepy scenes here. Do you feel like
almost like the cards were calling right out?
I know, right? I know.
Mm-hmm. So the settings in the book, how important are they in terms of how they factored into the storytelling and what inspired?
Well, I don't know if I mentioned I may have mentioned it earlier. In the book, red cards are good, black cards are bad. Low cards, high cards, like high rank cards are either very good or very bad. So I picked my scenes. I tried to think of like significant events that would happen in people's lives that were good, and obviously, events that would happen that would cause great heartache. And so I had basically a spreadsheet that had all the cards and all the different types of mishaps or, things that could happen to people, good and bad, and created my scenes around that. So if you can think of different catastrophes that can happen, that's how I would select what the picture on the card would be. Like I said, the cards have a personality, so the picture on the card isn't always obvious, but it does mean what it's supposed to mean in the end. Like when the person finally figures out whether the event already happened or they may figure it out just before it happens, the picture, all of a sudden, they have that light bulb moment and go, oh my God, that's what it means.
I also like that you have a spreadsheet for like your various calamities.
Well, I have to make sure I didn't use the same card twice, and
Exactly.
I have to make sure I had enough of the.
We
had enough
organization of it.
We really can't have another thing like what happened with your Children of Apis book.
Well, that was a big spreadsheet because that had 6 territories and that had a lot of characters.
Yeah. All right, folks. We are coming down to the end of this conversation, but we're going to wrap things up with the big question, of course, John. Is this a one-off for you, or do you see more books in this particular field down the road?
I do like the fiction. One of my friends was like, when I was writing it, he's like, you could have a follow-on. I don't know if I like the way this one kind of tied up. I don't know if I would do that. My next project, probably, I have 4 ideas for books, and I may do short books together, like authors do, have 4 novellas into a book, and they would be of the fiction variety, different types of fiction. So I already have the ideas. I have a few bullets on each one. So that's probably my next project.
Excellent. All right, folks. Well, that brings this conversation to a close. John, great talking to you again. I love this topic for the new book, and definitely will be checking it out. And folks, if you want to get your own copies, of course you do. You go to childrenofapis.com. Everything's there. You get Kindle versions, you got print versions. Go to your local bookstore. If they don't have it, ask them to order it. It's how this whole thing works. And John, definitely looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for having me on, Max. And they're all on Amazon too, by the way. That's the main area. So you can just look up all in the cards, Children of Apis. You can look up my name, John Raposa, and you'll find them all there. And Children of Apis book 1 is criminally free. So you can start the trilogy.
All right, folks. That brings this episode to a close. Thank you so much for listening to me. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you.
Bye.
And with that, we bring this episode to a close. Thanks for listening. And if you haven't already, check us out on Facebook under Citywide Blackout, and Twitter and Instagram under Citywide Max. You can catch this and all your favorite episodes on your favorite podcast platform. And new episodes are added every week, as well as on Boston Free Radio every Saturday at 10 p.m. You get at me at citywidemax@yahoo.com if you want to suggest a guest, submit your music, or just drop us a line. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.